Stop the car right now." The words flew from my lips with such urgency that my husband Arthur nearly hit the brakes on the interstate. We were driving through the Arizona desert, the California state line not more than an hour away, when a cold dread washed over me, a feeling so strong it was like every nerve in my body was on fire. "Margaret, what is it?" my husband asked, his voice tight with concern as he guided the car onto the dusty shoulder. The roar of passing trucks was deafening. My hands were trembling as I glanced at the heavy-looking duffel bag wedged behind my seat. Only a few minutes earlier, our son David had called me from his car up ahead. His voice was unusually cheerful, asking specifically about that bag. The way he'd said, "Love you, Mom," right before hanging up. In his 40 years, David had said those 3 words maybe a dozen times, and certainly not during a quick call to check in. "Something's wrong," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We have to stop. We can't follow them." My husband looked at me, his eyes showing the same unwavering trust he's had for the 50 years we've been married. He didn't question me. He didn't demand an explanation. He just put the car in park and killed the engine, a decision that almost certainly saved us from ruin. Because what I was about to find in that bag would unravel everything I thought I knew about my only son and the family I had poured my life into supporting. What they had planned for us, the risk they were willing to put us in to fix their financial mess. It was so cruel, so unimaginable, that even today I struggle to accept that my own child could betray me so completely. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why I was sitting on the side of a desert highway, overcome with a sudden paralyzing fear, you need to know about the last 5 years. 5 years of my love, my money, and my sacrifices that my son and his wife had come to see not as a gift, but as an entitlement. You see, I had been their financial lifeline ever since David was laid off from his job. For years, I was their emergency fund, their solution for every bill they couldn't pay. And in return for that devotion, they orchestrated a plan so wicked, so selfish, that it could have landed my husband and me in prison for the rest of our lives. Let me tell you how it all happened, and you'll see exactly why those 5 words, "Stop the car right now," were the most important words I've ever spoken. Before we go any further into my story, I'd love it if you'd leave a comment to let me know where you're watching from, and please subscribe to our channel. My name is Margaret, and I'm 70 years old. I live with my husband, Arthur, in the same cozy home in Phoenix, Arizona, where we raised our son, David. After 35 years as a librarian, I retired with a decent pension and a nest egg we'd carefully nurtured. Life was quiet and predictable. That is, until 5 years ago, when our son's world fell apart. David had a great job in tech sales, but his company was bought out, and his entire department was eliminated. Just like that, at 40 years old, he was unemployed with a wife, Jessica, and their little boy Leo to care for. The job hunt was tough. The positions he found were contract roles that paid a fraction of his old salary. As his mother, I couldn't just sit back and watch them drown. It started with small things, a few $100s for groceries, help with a utility bill. Then their car broke down, and they needed a major repair they couldn't afford. What was I supposed to do? Let my grandson be stuck at home? Soon enough, I was covering their biggest expenses, their mortgage, their insurance, their credit card bills. I was even paying for Leo's summer camps, so Jessica could keep her part-time job at a boutique. "Mom, I swear this is just until I land the right role," David would promise every time I transferred money into his account. "I'll pay back every single dollar." Jessica would offer a weak smile, but I always felt a strange resentment from her. I'd see her with a new designer handbag or notice they'd gone out for a fancy dinner, and I'd have to bite my tongue. But I kept telling myself that family takes care of family. And my goodness, I adored my grandson, Leo. I watched him every Tuesday and Thursday, taking him to the museum, teaching him how to bake cookies, just soaking in those precious moments that make being a grandmother the best job in the world. Those moments made every check I wrote feel worthwhile. Arthur sometimes worried we were stretching ourselves too thin. "Maggie, we have our own future to think about," he'd say. But the thought of Leo going without was unbearable. And besides, we were comfortable enough on our pensions and savings. The years passed in this blur of financial support. David would get a new contract, it would end, and he'd be scrambling again. And I kept patching the holes in their budget, being the ever-reliable bank of mom and dad that kept their lives afloat. By the time Leo was in second grade, I realized I'd been subsidizing their lifestyle for 5 straight years. Not just helping in a pinch, but consistently, month after month. They had grown so accustomed to my help that they never had to truly face their financial reality. Grandma Margaret was always there to rescue them. I believed I was being a supportive mother. I thought I was giving them a bridge to get to the other side of a difficult time. I never imagined that my love and generosity were slowly being twisted into something they saw as an obligation. They had gotten so comfortable with my money that they started to see it as their money. And the moment I finally drew a line in the sand, the moment I said no for the very first time, that's when I began to see the cold, hard truth about what I really meant to them. Last February, a single phone call changed everything. Leo was doing just fine in his local school. His report cards were always great. But David called me one evening with a story that sounded like a 5-alarm fire. "Mom, we have this incredible investment opportunity," he said, his voice buzzing with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "It's a new crypto startup. A friend of a friend is in on the ground floor. It's a sure thing, but we have to get in now." My heart sank. I've read enough stories about those kinds of sure things to be wary. "It sounds risky, David," I said gently. "What's the catch?" "There is no catch," Jessica piped in on speakerphone. "Except we need $20,000 to buy in. We were hoping you could help us out. Think of it, Margaret. This could set us up for life. No more asking you for help." The number stunned me. It was far more than I'd ever given them at once. But the thought of them finally achieving financial independence was tempting. Very tempting. "Let me talk it over with Arthur," I said, stalling for time. "It's a huge amount of money." The line went quiet. I could almost hear their smiles fading. "Mom," David said, his voice turning cool, "this is for your grandson's future. Don't you think that's worth the risk?" For 2 days, Arthur and I went back and forth. We looked at our savings, our retirement accounts. We could do it, but it would mean pulling from funds we had earmarked for our own long-term care. And something else was nagging at me. David's friend of a friend story sounded flimsy, and when I asked for a business plan or a website, he got defensive. It just didn't feel right. Finally, I made the call. "Honey, I've given it a lot of thought," I told them. "And I love you both, but I can't give you $20,000 for something so speculative. Maybe we could look at safer investments, like a mutual fund for Leo." The silence on the other end was chilling. "So, the answer is no?" David said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I'm saying I can't support this particular idea," I replied, trying to sound firm but loving. "This is just too much of a gamble." "I can't believe this," I heard Jessica whisper to David, not bothering to hide her disdain, "after everything we do for her." The call ended quickly after that, with a vague promise from David to look at other options that I knew would never happen. And just like that, the curtain fell. My regular babysitting days were suddenly canceled. "Leo has a play date," became the new excuse. Our monthly family dinners ceased to exist. When I'd call to speak to Leo, Jessica would answer and tell me it wasn't a good time. The final blow came when I saw them at the local botanical garden. Leo spotted me and started running toward me, his face lit up with a huge grin, shouting, "Grandma!" Before he could reach me, Jessica intercepted him, grabbing his hand and pulling him away with a sharp, "We're leaving." She shot me a look of pure ice before turning her back on me. My grandson looked over his shoulder, his expression a mixture of confusion and sadness. He couldn't understand why his mother was suddenly treating me like a stranger. For 5 years of unending support, I had set one single boundary. I had asked for one moment of fiscal prudence, and this was my punishment. The message couldn't have been clearer. My relationship with them was transactional. The grandmother who paid their bills, watched their son, and solved their problems was being iced out for daring to say, "Let's be careful," instead of just writing another check. This went on for 3 months. 3 months of heartbreak, of missing my grandson so much it ached, of starting to believe I had made a terrible mistake. I was on the verge of calling them and just giving them the money to get my family back. And that's right when the phone rang, with their sudden, miraculous change of heart and the invitation that would lead us to that deserted highway. In hindsight, I know those 3 months of the silent treatment weren't just a punishment. They were a strategy. They were priming me for what was to come. Then, out of the blue, the frost thawed. It was a Tuesday morning in May when David called, sounding happier than he had in months. "Hey, Mom, just calling to see how you and Dad are doing," he chirped, his friendly tone so abrupt it was suspicious. After 3 months of being ignored, it was like emotional whiplash. "We're doing all right, dear," I answered, guarded. "How are things with you?" "Fantastic. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Jessica and I were thinking we've all been so distant lately. We miss you guys. We want to make it right." My heart did a little flip. It was all I wanted to hear. Jessica's old college roommate has a beach house in San Diego, and she's offered it to us for the weekend. "We want you and Dad to come with us. A little family getaway." The thought of it, of reconnecting and putting the ugliness behind us, was like a dream come true. Maybe they'd finally understood that our family bond was worth more than a risky investment scheme. "That sounds absolutely lovely," I told him, my voice filled with relief. "When are you thinking of going?" "This Friday," he said. I know it's last minute, but her plans changed, and the house is open. It would be a perfect chance for Leo to spend time with his grandparents and for us to just relax together. We agreed they would follow us in their car. Our minivan had more room, and they said they had a lot of beach gear to bring. "Oh, and Mom," David added, right at the end of the call. "Would you mind taking a duffel bag for us? Our car's going to be packed. It's just some antique books and things for Jessica's friend. A thank you gift." "Of course, dear," I said instantly. "Not a problem at all." The evening before the trip, David dropped off the bag. It was a heavy, nondescript canvas duffel. He was all smiles, telling me how much Leo was looking forward to building sandcastles with his grandpa. "This trip is just what we need," he said, giving me a hug that felt genuine. I went to sleep that night, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, we loaded up the cars. Arthur and I took our minivan with our luggage and the duffel bag, and David, Jessica, and Leo followed behind us in their sedan. The first few hours of the drive were wonderful. Leo would wave at us from the back window, and it felt like we were a real family again. We were about 3 hours in, getting closer to the California border, when my cell phone buzzed. It was David. "Hey, Mom, quick question," he said, and I noticed a slight tremor in his voice. It was a flicker of nervousness that made my stomach clench. "Yes, honey?" "That duffel bag? It's still in the car with you, right? Safely packed?" "Yes, of course. It's right behind me on the floor." "Okay, good. Great. And you haven't opened it or anything, have you?" The question was bizarre. Why would I open their gift bag? "No, sweetheart, I haven't touched it. Is something wrong?" "Nope. No, just making sure. You know how they have those agricultural inspection stations at the border. Just wanted to be sure everything was secure." He paused for a beat, and then he said the words that would trigger every alarm bell in my soul. "I love you, Mom. I really, really do." My son has never been one for emotional declarations, and the intensity in his voice, that almost pleading tone, it was wrong. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. Every instinct I had, honed over 70 years of life, was screaming that I was in danger. "Stop the car right now." And that's when I said it, the words that changed everything. We pulled off at the next rest stop. While Arthur went inside to buy us some water, giving me a moment alone, I reached back and unzipped that heavy duffel bag. What I saw nestled between some old towels made my heart stop. It wasn't books. It was several pieces of ancient-looking pottery, each piece carefully wrapped, but I recognized the distinctive patterns immediately from my volunteer work at the local museum. They were priceless Native American artifacts. And I knew, with a certainty that made me feel sick, that they were stolen. My own son and daughter-in-law were using me, his elderly mother, as a decoy to smuggle stolen goods across a state line. They were counting on the fact that border agents would be less likely to search a car driven by a senior couple. If we had been stopped and that bag had been searched, we would have been the ones arrested. At our age, we would have been facing federal prison time for trafficking stolen cultural artifacts. And David's phone call, that wasn't a check-in. That was his guilty conscience. A last pathetic "I love you" before he let his own mother drive straight into a federal felony to solve his money problems. The whole trip, the reconciliation, the beach house, it was all a lie. A cruel, elaborate setup designed to exploit my love and my trust. As I stared at those stolen pieces of history, I realized my child was willing to sacrifice my freedom, my reputation, my entire life, simply because he was unwilling to live within his means. And in that moment, the Margaret who had spent 5 years enabling his irresponsibility, she died right there on the side of that highway. Standing at that dusty rest stop, gazing at stolen history hidden in a duffel bag, I felt a fundamental shift deep inside me. The Margaret who made excuses for her son, who valued family harmony above her own well-being, was gone. In her place was a woman who saw the truth with a terrible, piercing clarity. Arthur came back to the car and saw the look on my face. "What is it, Maggie?" he asked, his voice low. I just pointed to the open bag. The color drained from his face, replaced by a hard, cold fury I had not seen in our 50 years together. "We're going home," he said, his voice like stone. "Now." I could see David's car pull in behind us, could see him getting out, a confused and anxious look on his face. My phone began to ring again, but I just turned it off. I couldn't stand the sound of his voice, knowing what he had intended for me. The long drive back to Phoenix was silent. My mind, however, was a whirlwind. Every piece of the last few months clicked into place. The cold shoulder after I refused the investment money wasn't just spite, it was a tactic. They needed to create a distance, so that when they offered a reconciliation, I would be so relieved and grateful that I wouldn't think to question the details. They used my love for my grandson and my desire for a peaceful family as weapons against me. When we pulled up to their house, David and Jessica were already standing in the driveway, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning panic. "Mom, what happened?" David called out as I got out of our car and walked toward him, carrying the duffel bag. "Why did you turn around? The border was only an hour away." I placed the bag on the pavement at his feet. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and wondered when he had become a stranger. When had his financial desperation curdled into this monstrous selfishness? "I know what's in the bag, David," I said, my voice steady. The blood drained from both their faces. Jessica reached out and grabbed his arm, and I saw a flash of pure terror between them. "Mom, it's not what you think," David stammered. "No," I said, cutting him off. "There's nothing to explain. You used me. You were going to let me and your father take the fall for a federal crime to solve your money problems." "We were desperate," Jessica cried out. "We owe some very dangerous people money from a bad investment. We thought if we could just get these to a buyer in California." "You thought you could sacrifice me," I finished for her. My grandson, Leo, was standing on the porch, looking scared and bewildered by the tension. My heart broke for him, a little boy trapped in the wreckage of his parents' bad choices. "I want you both to listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice gaining strength. "As of this moment, you are cut off. All financial support ends today. No more mortgage payments, no more insurance, no more grocery money. Nothing." "Mom, you can't mean that," David pleaded, his voice cracking. "We rely on you. We won't make it without your help." "Then you will have to learn how to make it," I replied. "The way other adults do, the ones who don't use their elderly parents as mules for stolen goods." I turned to go back to our car. David lunged forward and grabbed my arm. "Please, Mom, don't do this. We made a terrible mistake. If you cut us off, we'll lose the house. Everything." I pulled my arm away from his grasp. "You were willing to let me lose everything," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "My freedom, our home, our future. Now you will finally have to face the consequences of your own actions." As we drove away, I saw them in the rearview mirror, standing over that bag in their driveway, the architects of their own destruction, finally realizing their safety net had just been permanently removed. That night, I sat down at my dining room table and systematically dismantled the financial web I had woven around them for 5 years. I canceled the automatic bill payments, removed them as authorized users on my credit card, and changed my bank passwords. The sheer amount of money I had been pouring into their lives was shocking. Within a week, I had severed every last tie. I also made another call that night to our family lawyer. I explained the situation, and he helped me create a detailed, notarized record of the events to protect myself in case they ever tried to lie and claim I was a willing participant in their scheme. For the first time in years, I was putting my own security and sanity before my son's wants. It didn't feel selfish. It felt right. I realized that by constantly bailing them out, I hadn't been helping them. I had been crippling them. I had prevented them from ever learning to stand on their own 2 feet. Now, the lesson would be a hard one. About a month later, their carefully constructed world began to crumble. The phone calls started. First David, then Jessica, their voices shifting from angry entitlement to pleading desperation. I let every call go to voicemail. "Mom, our utilities are getting shut off. You can't just do this to us," one message said. "Margaret, please. The bank is threatening foreclosure. Just help us this one last time," another begged. But I had heard one last time for 5 years. I held firm. Then I received a call from Jessica's sister, a woman I had only met a handful of times. "Margaret, I'm worried," she said quietly. "David and Jessica are planning on driving to California themselves this weekend. They're trying to sell those things. They're in over their heads." My blood ran cold. Even after being caught, they were still choosing crime over responsibility. I called my lawyer again. He strongly advised me to give an anonymous tip to the authorities. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I thought of my grandson. What would happen to him? That Saturday, I was sitting in my garden when the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Am I speaking with Margaret?" a man's voice asked. "This is Detective Miller with the California Highway Patrol. Your son David and his wife Jessica were arrested this morning outside of Barstow. They had stolen cultural artifacts in their vehicle. They've listed you as their emergency contact." My hands shook, but it wasn't from surprise. I had been waiting for this call. "Where is their son?" was all I could manage to say. "He's with his aunt for now, but Child Protective Services will need to arrange for a more stable placement, and you are listed as his next of kin." Within a day, I was signing emergency guardianship papers. My sweet grandson, Leo, arrived at our house that evening, looking small and lost, clutching his backpack. "Grandma," he whispered that first night as I tucked him into our guest room, "where are Mommy and Daddy?" How do you explain to a child that his parents chose a life of crime over him? "They made some very poor decisions, sweetheart," I told him, smoothing his hair. "But you're going to stay here with Grandpa and me now. You're safe, and we will take such good care of you." In the months that followed, the legal system did its work. David and Jessica were sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. Their house was foreclosed on, their cars repossessed. I felt no joy in their ruin, only a deep sadness for the life they had thrown away and an immense relief that Leo was now safe with us. The custody process was simple. Faced with prison, they willingly signed over temporary guardianship rather than have Leo enter the foster system. He started at the local elementary school, a wonderful public school where the teachers were kind and attentive. No fancy private academy was needed, just a stable, loving home. He did his homework at our kitchen table, and Arthur taught him how to play checkers. We spent our evenings reading books on the couch. Slowly, I watched the anxiety fade from his eyes. He was no longer living in a house filled with the stress of unpaid bills and desperate secrets. He was just a kid, allowed to be a kid. "Grandma," he said to me one afternoon a few months later, "I like living here. It's calm." He had put into one word what all of us had been missing: peace. As for my son and daughter-in-law, they sometimes write letters from prison. David's are filled with remorse and promises to change. Jessica's are full of blame, somehow twisting their situation to be my fault. I don't write back. When they are released, I know there will be a legal fight for permanent custody of Leo. We are prepared for it. We are documenting the stable, happy life we have provided for him. For now, our life is full of school projects, trips to the park, and the quiet joy of raising this wonderful boy. He is thriving, finally free from the chaos of his parents' choices. And I have learned the hardest lesson of my life. that true love isn't always about giving in. Sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is say no. I'm 72 now, raising a grandson when I thought my parenting days were long over. But I will spend every moment I have left teaching him to be a man who faces his problems with honesty, who treats others with respect, and who never, ever expects someone else to pay for his mistakes. That's my story. It's how my intuition on a lonely highway not only saved me, but gave my grandson the chance at the life he deserved. What do you think? Have you ever had to make a tough choice to stop helping a family member for their own good? I'd love to read your story in the comments. I tell a new story here every single day, so be sure to follow and click that little bell so you don't miss what I have to share tomorrow.